Welcome to Finding Faith, the space we come to share stories of encounter, ask questions, and share in the lived experience of others. As you listen to the stories of our interview guests, I ask that you consider the courage it takes to stand before your peers and share your experience of faith for the benefit of another. My name is Jessie Bennett, and this is the 17th episode of Finding Faith. Today, we have with us Jose Solorza. Jose, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, my name's Jose Solorza. I am the fourth of 5 children. We originally came from El Paso, Texas. Have been living in Henderson since 2002. And I went to Holy Name School in Henderson, and then Owensboro Catholic High School, and then University of Louisville. Now I'm out of school working at a pretty good job, so life's going pretty good. Been married for 4 months.
I was to say, Jose had to get married in the middle of all this madness.
Yeah. So,
you can tell us a little bit about that later.
yeah, that's part of the faith trip. It was a trip in itself.
Jose is going to share his story with us about how he came to encounter Jesus and actually how his family came to encounter Jesus through a saint. So Jose, if you don't mind, go ahead and share your story with us.
So my faith journey actually begins in 1920s and 30s Mexico, when communism had taken over the country and the president had instated anti-religious and anti-clerical laws. This meant that the faithful had to hide their faith, and celebrate the sacraments in remote gullies and canyons. They were way out there, like it looked like you were like in the middle of like the Grand Canyon, like deep in a gully, and there was a little altar set up with like little relics, wooden crosses, but like nothing was set because they had to move everything, obviously, if like the troops came by. And so yeah, it was definitely a hidden faith at the time. Priests were widely persecuted and arrested or even killed by agents of the state. And one of these such priests was canonized in 2000 by JP2 for his faith, bravery, and deep devotion to the Eucharist. His name was San Pedro de Jesús Maldonado. He had a deep love for the Lord and was willing to suffer the persecution, and was even heard praying that he would be willing to be martyred so long as he'd be able to receive the Eucharist before he was killed. He served in Chihuahua, Mexico, where my family's from. It's the northern state right on the border with Texas. So my great-grandfather, Felipe Nevares Bustamante, created in his home a false wall where Padre Maldonado would be able to stay and be safe. Essentially, it was like you would walk into the kitchen and see the sink, and below the sink, it just looked like a regular cabinet, but it was actually a secret door that led to like a tiny room where they held like grain and like food stock for like the animals, and that's where he would stay, and that's where he would I think he would like meet people there for like confession, stuff like that, but that's where he would like sleep and hide and eat. My great grandfather also built the church in it's called San Jose Church in that area in Chihuahua. Padre Maldonado would be transported in secret by those in the community in order to celebrate with the sacraments. So like, he baptized my paternal grandfather and my maternal grandmother. So it's pretty cool that my grandparents were baptized by a saint. So it's something I always thought was really, really awesome. But on February 10th, 1937, Ash Wednesday of that year, he was captured by soldiers, beaten, and processed barefoot to the town hall where they fractured his skull and even hit him so hard his left eye was removed from its socket. And I know this is gruesome, but it's part of the true depravity of sin that is always and will always be present in this world. But men like him show an example of the kind of faith that leads you to put your body and your whole life on the line to show the truth of the good and joyfulness that the Lord brings. And it's also interesting that he was processed very similarly through the streets like Jesus was in Jerusalem. And that's actually really something that like my mom and my dad, when I was talking to them about this, when I was preparing for this podcast, they were talking about that. And then I read it in the articles about him too. So it's something that everyone really found shocking that they was so similar. So while he was being beaten, the pyx he had been carrying in his jacket pocket fell out and spilled the Blessed Sacrament all over the floor. And one of the soldiers picked it up and mockingly said, "Eat this," and shoved it in his throat. But he unknowingly was fulfilling the priest's final wish before being martyred. So subsequently afterwards, he was taken to the hospital, and he was pronounced dead at the scene from the terrible beating that they had given him. So when I asked my mom about this, she also mentioned to me that there was a time when my great-grandfather was stopped by the soldiers on a rural road because they knew that he was holding him and that he was involved in a lot of the Catholic community there. And they asked him where he was, and he said he didn't know. And they threatened to hang him on one of the nearby trees, but he said he still didn't know. He wouldn't tell them. So one of the soldiers then responded to him, "Well, we may not take away your faith, but we will take away the faith of your children and your children's children." 3 generations on, we're still doing pretty good so far. As a side note, the Diocese of El Paso, Texas, made a short documentary of this story, and it's on the El Paso Diocese website, and it even has my grandma in it, so that's pretty cool. I actually was looking up information about Padre Maldonado just to make sure I had everything right, and I was watching that documentary, and I had no idea my grandma was on it. Just had no clue she was there, and she popped up, and I was just like, "What the heck, Grandma? You didn't tell me you were in this." So that was a very interesting surprise. So as a child, I grew up hearing all about Padre Maldonado and all of his stories, and his bravery and his great virtue, and how my family was able to help out in his life and his journey. So it always made me very proud of the family I came from, and definitely kind of gave me an impetus to live out my faith. And then we did that. So we grew up going to Mass every Sunday. Every time we'd go on a long trip, we went frequently to Chicago to visit relatives, and we would pray the rosary always when we're taking long drives. Every year on December 12th, we'd celebrate the Feast of Our Lady de Guadalupe. And even when we moved to Henderson, and we were initially like cut off from most of our traditional celebrations because there weren't that many Hispanics there at the time, we helped foster that growth of the Hispanic community in Henderson. So that was also really, really great watching that grow. And so, for instance, like for the feast day of Our Lady of Guadalupe, we always had like a little skit that we did during Mass, and my dad and my brother and I helped build like all the props for that, and we kept those for like 10 years. Like we reuse them all the time, every year. It's definitely been a really great experience growing up and being involved with that celebration, especially specifically because it's such a vital celebration for Mexicans, especially, and the Hispanic community in general, and the Americas, because she is the patroness of the Americas. So yeah, like I said, I went to Holy Name and I went to Owensboro Catholic, and all through school we did mission trips and retreats, and we even helped out in some camps. So even though I was very involved in my faith, I was in that situation where it's like almost in the air at certain points. Like you're just like, there isn't anything else. It's kind of just like, you're Catholic, your friends are Catholic. There's not a whole lot that you go up against at this point. So when I went to college my freshman year at the University of Louisville, I didn't have my family there alongside with me, but I did luckily have some friends that went to high school with me that went with me to Mass, and especially my friend Dylan Payne. He and I would go and like explore and try to find like new churches to go to that we haven't been to, because there's a lot of Catholic churches in Louisville. So that was always like a really, really fun experience, getting to go and find new churches and be like, "Oh yeah, we didn't really like that priest very much. We can go to a new church." No, I'm kidding. They were all great. But we really enjoyed doing that. It was more like on me. Like, you can't just expect to be at church on Sunday. Like, you have to actually figure out where you're going to go and make time to go and go to church and pray it just by myself, because my mom wasn't there to pray with me anymore. So I found that in college, I really enjoyed praying. Like right before I went to sleep, I would pray for, I don't know, a couple minutes, but it really helped me like refocus after studying and being involved with school a lot. And what also really helped me at school was attending Mass during the week at U of L. There's a church nearby U of L, St. Louis Bertrand, that has Dominican friars that run it. And one of them, his name was Father Martin Martini, which I always thought was kind of a funny name. But he was an amazing priest. He was phenomenal. He was very down to earth and very open about the faith and about our shortcomings and how we find our way in Jesus Christ. He would always offer time before Mass for confession and an hour of adoration afterwards. And it was always like at noon, so it was in between classes. So it was always like a really great time to just go and be silent in front of our Lord and receive absolution, because I felt like, we went frequently in high school, but like I never went by myself. Like it was always like during school or something else. It was fun going. I don't know, fun, but it was enriching, I would say, to go during the week at school. And it helped also relieve a lot of stress, because as most college people who have been to college know, that it is an extremely stressful time. In college, I also became involved with CLI, or the Christian Leadership Institute, that was held at Mount St. Joseph, just outside of Owensboro, during the summers. It was a week where youth from around the diocese were taught how to build up the church in their parish communities and create concrete ways in which to build them up. So like how to set up fundraisers, how to set up community building experiences, stuff like that. And I was one of the people that worked in the background. We were called program coordinators, and we would be getting supplies ready, running errands, doing whatever people needed us to do. So the second summer I helped out, I was paired with Emily Lynn, who was a grade below me at Catholic High. We never really spoke to each other in high school, but right away I could tell we clicked. We spent a lot of time together that week in car rides into town, cooking food and just sitting and talking, making jokes, looking at memes. We looked at a lot of memes, shared a lot of memes. So yeah, we also spent a lot of time together in times of prayer and reflection. And I began thinking, she's pretty great. I could see this going somewhere. So after the camp, we just so happened to be playing soccer on the same team with Mason Robertson, another friend of ours. And he was kind of like that mutual friend between us, to like, hey, we should keep playing soccer together so we could, get to know each other some more. So we hung out a couple times afterwards, and went on some dates, and then 3 years later we got married. So in her, I found someone who was not shy about her faith at all. Someone who found joy in living her Catholic life and pride in the faith that she grew up in. She's really been the person I've prayed for a long time. And I know God has a special calling for us whenever we met at that camp. I'm not trying to say God is like a genie that granting wishes, or like a vending machine. Like I asked for a girlfriend, pops out a girlfriend. It's not like that. Like that's too simple for him. He allows us our free wills, and although he knew we'd do it, Emily and I both had to say yes to being involved in that camp for a week out of the summer, when most people in college are trying to like work and get some extra money for the year, or just relax for a little while after being in school for so long. And this was my second year being asked to help out there. So there was a sense of me like, I don't know if I want to do this again. But I did, and so did she, and so we entered into God's plan that, unbeknownst to us at the time, resulted in marriage. So throughout our dating life, we enjoyed getting to celebrate Mass. We went to adoration a lot at Carmel Home. We celebrated holidays together and all that usual stuff. We both really enjoyed those things before, but when you get to do them with someone you think you can spend the rest of your life with, they take on a different meaning. You start to see these little habits start forming in one another, and you start to think about traditions you had as a kid and how you want them to be, and how you want to do them with this person, and then, show your kids how to do it. I know for my part, I was very thankful to her because she taught me some of the traditional prayers like the Divine Mercy Chaplet and others, but she put in frame for me the kind of man that I needed to be for her and for our future family. A good Catholic man that sadly is lacking in my generation. So she once told me after Mass one Sunday that she really liked that when we went to receive communion, I would always make sure I went behind her because she felt like I was ushering her to Jesus. And that really struck me deeply, and it's always struck with me because it really showed me that I'm called to be someone who isn't just going to find Jesus with him by himself. He's going to take with him his own little flock. So being called to be like a little shepherd is kind of cool. And I also wanted to say that, like going to church and receiving the sacraments and everything is obviously immensely important. But Emily and I have lived our relationship in a way that is not burdensome or boring, because oftentimes young people think about living a devout Catholic life is strict and harsh and annoying, and it's fire and brimstone, and you will never smile for the rest of your life. And I feel like, especially in college, a lot of college people think that there is absolutely no joy in living a devout Catholic life. But it's just a facade that they see or that they've seen from movies or TV shows. It's not the true joy found in the Eucharist. The true peace and lifting of anxiety after you go to confession and you've brought out the deepest, most closed and often twisted part of yourself and bring that in front of somebody and feeling the absolution, knowing that the Creator who made you, who loves you, said, I know, and you're good. And that's something so profound and deep that I feel like people just have no idea, especially my age, have no idea that feeling and the relief it brings. And the joy to experience your faith life with someone who is trying to build you up as well. It's not like we are constantly in church or anything. We live our life normally, but we live our life in a frame knowing that we're here for a reason and here to love each other and to love those around us and to spread his message. So we got married this past summer during this weird and uncertain time of pandemic, and it was stressful. We went from having a wedding with around 250 family and friends or so. My dad's one of 7 children, and my mom's one of 13. So we have a very large extended family, and although they all live across the U.S. and some in Mexico still, my sister's weddings both had, I think, 300 at least. So we were expecting around then, and then the pandemic hit. So it went from 250 or so to less than 50, almost just our immediate families, a few family friends, but that was pretty much it. We had to change venues for the reception because we couldn't have an indoor wedding anymore, or indoor reception anymore. We had to follow all the new rules, and we even had to FaceTime our last couple of pre-Cana classes with Father Mike Clark. So that was interesting. But we didn't let that distract us from the step we were about to take. We were going to become one flesh and promise ourselves to the other for the rest of our lives. It was time for us to form our own little church. And that really helps me frame my faith as something that I want to share to our children and ensure that that threat from that soldier from Mexico all those years ago will never come true, and especially not come true in our generation, and God willing, not in the next.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Before we get started with the questions, I just want to point out something about this story, and that's the amazing providence of God that can be shown throughout. I seriously got cold chills the first time I was reading through this story about how Padre Maldonado said that he wouldn't mind being martyred as long as he could receive the Eucharist before he died. And you mentioned, the horror of the story and the depravity of sin. This guard, who didn't even know what the Eucharist was, fulfilled his greatest desire before killing Padre Maldonado. And I just find that so incredible that God's providence won out at the end of the day, and that he used this guard for his greater glory, and the guy didn't even know it.
Yeah, that's definitely something that always stuck out in my head. And that's something that my mom, my dad, my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents always mention that fact above anything else. Like, God has a plan. Like, there's even in the disgusting depravity that was his martyrdom and the martyrs of Mexico, because it's a whole group of martyrs that were killed at that time. He knows how to bring good out of it.
So if it's okay, I just have a couple questions for you. So I guess the first thing I want to talk about is your family and moving from El Paso to Kentucky. I imagine living in El Paso, it's very steeped in Hispanic culture and tradition. And then moving to Henderson in the middle of Kentucky. Yeah. So what was that? What was that experience of faith like for you, or that shift, I guess, from Texas to Kentucky?
My dad we moved for his job to a small denim plant that was in Henderson. He was working for Levi's at the time. And whenever he traveled there, he wanted to make sure that there was a Catholic church and that there was a Catholic school, because we were all enrolled in Catholic schools at that time. I was only 5, but my brother was 12. So he wanted to make sure, because he came over here by himself at first. He wanted to make sure that there was a good Catholic church and a good Catholic school. And he found that in Holy Name. So he and my mom came back again. They went to church, I think, a couple times, really prayed about it, and felt that it was the right place for us, even though it was completely different in every way. Like, there aren't that many trees in El Paso. There's nothing but trees in Henderson. There's very little rain, no snow, barely in El Paso. And, well, the past couple of years we haven't had very much snow, but
yeah, there used to be a lot more snow.
Yeah, like it gets cold and it does snow occasionally, but not like how it snowed here before. So that was huge. And then the language barrier was also huge. And like all the supermarkets in Mexico or in El Paso were like having like a little Mexico. Like any service you wanted in El Paso, you could get it in English or Spanish. Like it didn't matter what it was. Like doctors, lawyers, car parts, whatever it was. So that switch was huge. Also because we didn't have any family in Kentucky. Our closest family was in Chicago, and that's still 6 hours away from Henderson.
So I assume you had lots of family that was in El Paso?
We had family in El Paso, and then we had family in Phoenix, which wasn't very far away. We had family in Juarez, which is right across from up the border in El Paso. It really just looks like one humongous city. You can't really even tell where the border is. And then we had some more uncles on my mom's side that were still in Chihuahua. And so going over there was just like completely different. But it was great in the fact that it just made us even stronger as a family, because at first we just had each other. I mean, I think we each are very personable, so we got accustomed to life pretty quickly. We made friends pretty quickly, but it was definitely like, hey,
a shift.
Yeah, it's just us, and it's easier for me to say it because I was only 5, so I was like just going into kindergarten, and so like my friend, the guy I roomed with in college, Dylan, has been my friend since kindergarten. So we went kindergarten, high school, college, roommates. So
and
the
some
whole
of your
9 yards.
Other siblings would have been a little bit older than
yeah,
that.
so my brother would have been
left
like
friends behind.
Right. Yeah. So the shift for them was even bigger. So for me, I just kind of grew into it, and it wasn't as bad. But the language barrier was definitely noticeable because I would speak Spanish at home, and that's pretty much it. But gradually, we built up that Hispanic community in Holy Name.
I was going to say, did your family have a part in doing that? Because I know that they've got a pretty thriving Hispanic community now, don't they?
Yes, yeah. So initially, there wasn't like a Spanish mass at Holy Name. There was a Spanish mass in St. Michael's in Seabury, so we would go there for a while before we kind of organized some more families to go to the one in Holy Name. And then as far back as I can remember, Father Jason McClure was bilingual, and he gave a Spanish mass. And then after him, Father Shaughness came and has been there for 10 years, and now it's Father Gary. Yeah, so it definitely grew from not very much to a really great community that's there now.
Now, I want to move on to talking about you and your lovely bride. So I love how you talk about cooperating with his grace and his invitation. You had to, you and Emily both had to say yes to that.
I forgot to mention actually that we did I'd never gone to Youth 2000 during high school. I don't know why I never just went. I just didn't do it, but I went with her a couple times. So that's definitely been a really fun experience, and getting to chaperone with her really getting me excited to do like youth events and help out, like give back to the church, like with her, because she's a lot more fun to be around than just me by myself.
That actually brings me to my next point, where you were mentioning living out your faith joyfully. And I love that you called attention to the fact that you can live a normal life and a normal, happy, holy life while following the teachings of the church. And so what are some of the ways in which you and Emily live out your faith?
All right, well, that was an easy question.
I told you, I'm not trying to get you.
No, I'm just kidding. Well, like I said, like we've been definitely in our dating life, and we haven't really had many chances, especially with COVID, but helping out with like youth events, especially because we're still, I mean, I'm 23, she's 22, we're still pretty young. Be like being around the young kids and helping them out and helping like get them in a direct path to. And
you guys volunteer with your at a parish, right?
Not right now per se, because we don't really have a parish right now. Like we go to Holy Name, we go to Blessed Mother, we go to St. Martin.
Wherever you can get to that weekend.
Right, yeah. Just because we're in between with school, with her school and living in Henderson and her parents being in Owensboro and trying to go to Mass with them as well as going to Mass with my family. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of split right now. That is one of our goals of coming back and maybe not being youth ministers per se, but always being able to help out for youth ministry. So like helping out with like E17 is something we've really enjoyed. But I especially like living out my faith as an example, and with Emily as an example for my little sister who's in high school, to show her what a good Catholic relationship looks like, especially our age and our time. Because I mean, you just get on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, and
any social media
or
outlet.
TikTok or whatever it is, and it's not a very Catholic outlook. Most of the time, it's very anti-Catholic, very anti, I don't know, fundamental principles. I feel like not a lot of reflective thinking on your life, kind of like a nihilistic, like, oh, well, this is it and nothing else is going to happen after we die.
Yep.
So getting her to know, like, I mean, along with the rest of my family, but I kind of take that on myself of try to being like a good role model with her or for her with Emily. And I know Emily feels really strongly about that because she sees a lot of herself in my little sister. So being a good example for her is definitely something that we really focus on. But I always like going to Mass and always being happy to be there at Mass. I mean, you can't really tell now because I have a mask on. You can't really see my smiling face. But trying to...
Or anyone's.
Yeah, exactly. No one. Everyone's just sitting there. But showing other people my age, younger than me, that I'm happy to be here. I'm really happy to be in the presence of my Lord and to be in his presence with my wife, and to show that it's not an outdated thing. Like, we're not pretending to be living in the 1950s or anything like that. Like, this is 2020 and we're a happy married young Catholic couple.
You mean you can do that?
Yeah.
Without
exactly.
living like you're living in the 1950s?
Exactly. Yeah.
That possible?
She has TikTok. I have Instagram. We like to be on our phones.
Whoa. You're not allowed to have fun. I'm sorry.
We have a Switch. We play it a lot. We have a puppy. It's actually funny. We were married for a Saturday, Sunday, puppy on Monday.
Oh my goodness. A lot of life changes all at once.
Yes, exactly. We were just trying to cram as many as we could in a weekend.
I mean, why not? It's
exactly.
COVID
exactly.
world, and there's nothing else going on. Why not?
Being joyful at Mass is definitely, I mean, I'm not trying to say it as like a cop-out, like, but I think it's important for people to, especially kids like maybe in high school that are just now getting to drive, and now it's like kind of their responsibility to go to Mass, to see someone a little older than them still going to Mass, still enjoying being at Mass, and sharing that with someone for the rest of their life.
Well, I'm so glad that you guys are there, mask and all, smiling behind them. Yes. I can see it in your eyes, I mean, that's what I always tell people. I'm just smiling bigger so you can see it in my eyes. So we've talked a little bit about how you and Emily live out your faith joyfully as young people, but I want to get a little more specific. What does your prayer life look like, and what are some of the devotions or prayer styles that you feel drawn to in practicing your faith?
So Emily and I both really enjoy going to Mass together, like I said earlier, but we like to do the Divine Mercy Chaplet, which she taught me. I hadn't known it beforehand, so I was really grateful that she taught me how to do that. Currently, I am teaching her how to pray the Our Father and the Hail Mary and Glory Be in Spanish, so that we can pray the Hail Mary the Rosary in Spanish together. We also always, anytime I go to work, because I work night shift, anytime I go to work, we make sure that we bless each other. So just, just do the sign of the cross on each other and say a little prayer in our heads that each of us will be safe when we're apart for the night. And so it's something that I picked up from my parents. They always blessed us whenever we would leave the house growing up. And we really find solace in that. And we enjoy doing that. I drive about 30 minutes to go to work. So I have, since the past Lent, have taken up praying the rosary every day when I go to work, which I really enjoyed. I now know all the mysteries of the rosary. I didn't know them beforehand. I've enjoyed praying that, and I like that because growing up, the Virgen de Guadalupe was always a big part of our faith. So I feel like I'm just expressing that in a new way because I didn't pray the rosary as much beforehand. Usually just like with my parents on trips or during special events or something had happened. So I've enjoyed that.
At one point in your story, you mention going to confession and the weight that's lifted off your shoulders when you go. You talk about how when you go in, when you give all of your sins over to him, you confess all of your sins. God says, I know, and you are good. I love that you point that out because that is one of the most oft asked questions of kids when preparing for confession, and one of the biggest hindrances to them wanting to go is the shame that they feel, the fear that they feel going in. So can you just talk a little bit about what draws you to confession and why it is such a beautiful sacrament?
So what draws me to confession is hope. Hope in restoring myself, I guess is the best way to say it. Hope in restoring myself as someone that I know to be good and to be a follower of Christ. It's hope in knowing that just because you mess up doesn't mean you can't start up again. It's hope in knowing that everything you've worked for, or if you have a temptation that you've been fighting against and you fall to that temptation, it's hope in knowing that you can get back up and you can start again. You can go back to fighting that temptation and overcoming it. And it's hope in knowing that not all is lost. It's hope in knowing that the Lord loves you, that Jesus will take your hand and the Holy Spirit will guide you. And it's really beautiful because there aren't a lot of times where you feel hope in this world. It can be pretty sad and pretty unfair, but we find hope in confession and hope in knowing that we've messed up, but God forgives us for our sins and we can move forward. I don't think I appreciated the sacrament of confession before I went to college and had the stress and anxiety of college built into that as well. So I think it's a hopeful sacrament, even though most people often feel that it's shameful and sorrowful going to confession. But that for me is just an indication that they have a good conscience and they know that they've faltered and that they need to realign themselves with Christ, and they have the hope that they can do that.
I could not love that response more. Hope. I love that it's the first word that came to your mind when you thought of the sacrament of reconciliation. Hope and not shame. Like you said, it's a sacrament of hope, not a sacrament of shame. Wonderful. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I don't think so. Just always keep Our Lady close to you and she'll bless you abundantly.
Thank you so much, Jose, for joining us today and telling us your story. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you all for listening here today. If you are interested in hearing more stories of encountering and finding faith, make sure to tune in next week to hear from our next guest. If you have any questions, Need someone to journey with, or would be interested in sharing your story, please contact me at findingfaith123@gmail.com.